Hi, yeah, can everybody hear me okay? How is my sound? Laura, yeah, is it okay?
Good. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
All right. So if my sound goes cracky, then turn your cameras off as a general rule. Um, okay, so it's my first time doing a Zoom with this group, and I see here in my list of participants some familiar faces and some people that I've never met before. So what I know about Dharma Gates is that it's aimed at young people and a lot of the participants are beginners. So what I want to do today is go over some, you could say, Dharma basics. But if you are somewhat more experienced in the Dharma, then I encourage you all to give your whole hearts to it, because sometimes when we go back to these really foundational questions, we see that there is still definitely space to learn something new. When we reconnect to these really fundamental aspects of the Dharma, there's still plenty of space to learn something new. So, to get us started, I want to open with a question. And actually, I might put us into small groups for discussion of this question, because I want to get as much juice out of it as possible. So the question is, why do we practice the Dharma? There are so many things we could have done with this Sunday afternoon or Sunday morning if you're in America. We could have spent the time watching Netflix or going for a walk in the park or, I don't know, cooking a meal. But we've decided to use the time to come together in the Dharma. So this is the question, why? Why do we come to the Dharma? I'm going to put us into rooms of, let's say, 3 or 4. We're into small groups of 3 or 4. And I'll give you 10 minutes to discuss the topic between yourselves. When you're in your breakout rooms, please make sure that you give everybody the chance to talk. And then when we come back, we can hear what we have learned from these small groups. So I'll just pass over. Great. I think we have everybody back. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to invite us all to write in the chat now one of the things that stood out most from that conversation, why we come to the Dharma. I'm sure you all thought of many things, but the thing that hit you the hardest, if you can all in one sentence, post that in the chat to everyone. To live more peacefully. What else do we have? To come out of suffering. Is there such a thing as truth? Yeah, to remind myself of a deeper way of being and relating to the world for the benefit of others. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, the energy that's exchanged during long moments of silence. Yeah, to take actions that don't always cause suffering. Yeah. To release the knowing. Yeah, I love that one. Luke always in my group, and we were speaking about this sense of knowing what you don't know. gaining an understanding of how little we know. Thank you all for sharing. So I'm using this exercise sort of to legitimize why I chose this theme for Zoom. Because in all of my experience practicing and teaching the Dharma, what I've come to understand is that when we really look deeply at why we come to the Dharma, why are we here, why are we practicing, although there might be very many diverse reasons, they all boil down to two reasons. And these two reasons, it's like two sides of the same coin. One reason is we want to find a way out of suffering for ourselves, for others in the world. We want an end of suffering. We want an exit from suffering. And the other reason is we want to know the truth. And these two are coming together because the less we suffer, the clearer we start to see how things really are. And also, as we see things more clearly as they really are, we start to live in harmony with that truth we're observing and we suffer less. So these two forces of truth and suffering are working together all of the time in our Dharma practice, motivating us. It's the whole reason that we're bothering in the first place, but also showing the direction, showing us the way to go. We're always orienting ourselves towards truth and away from suffering. It's really the essence of Dharma practice. So I'm going to speak a little bit more about each of these in turn. First of all, about truth. I loved the conversation that I was having in my little group with Pete and with Luca about truth and getting a sense of not knowing much. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a history of the Buddha here. And the Buddha died, and none of his teachings have been written down. He was a monk walking around teaching people in person and teaching them really like one-on-one or to a group. It was very context dependent. He had no textbook. He was being responsive to the moment. And then after the Buddha died, his monks, the monks in his Sangha, thought, what are we going to do to preserve these teachings? And so they all came together to recite everything that they could remember the Buddha having taught over his lifetime. And from those recitations, we have what we now call the Tipitaka, which is the collection of the Buddha's teachings in Pali. And the very first teaching that they recited, the very first thing that they thought was important to get down, was a teaching that we call the Brahmajala Sutta. And in the Brahmajala Sutta, I encourage you all to read it. It's the first sutta in the Digha Nikaya. It is describing all of the different things that people can believe are true. Different things that people can believe are true about the universe, about liberation, about God, about all sorts of things, about what the mind is and how it's related to the body and what is consciousness and what is ultimate, all of these big questions. And most of that sutta is taken up with an enumeration of all of those different types of views. Some people believe this, some people believe that, some people believe that, some people believe this. And then radically at the end of that sutta, the Buddha says, and all of this, he doesn't praise any view and condemn another one. He says, all of this is an example of clinging to views. And then this is the most powerful bit of the sutra, and it's often overlooked. The Buddha asks, why is it, monks, that people cling to such views? Why is it that this one's believe in this thing, this one's believe in the other thing? And the Buddha says it's because of the feeling associated with that view. It means we believe what we believe because it feels good. We believe what we believe because it feels good. So When the Buddha approached truth, he approached it in a radically different way. Obviously, just believing whatever feels good isn't the way. So the Buddha said there's 4 kinds of truth. There's the truth that is beneficial, but it's not pleasing. There's the truth, but it's beneficial and it's pleasing. There's the truth that isn't beneficial and it's also not pleasing. And there's the truth that isn't beneficial, but it feels good. So if we can only have 2 out of those 4, if you go to the truth shop and you've only got $2 to spend and each truth costs you $1, which 2 are you going to have? The ones that feel good or the ones that are beneficial? Most of us, because we're on a Zoom call speaking about the Dharma, we say, no, I'll definitely have the beneficial ones. I'm wise me. But in reality, very often we pick up the truths that feel good, whether or not they're beneficial. So I'm going to put this to the test, and you can put your answers in the chat if you have one. I'm going to start you with a really easy question, and you can all write your truth in the chat. Think of a nice easy question to start with. Let's go with this question. Is there a God? What's the truth? You put your answer in the chat for me. Who's going to be brave? Yes, not as a thing, but as an activity of everything. Somebody else? Yes. Wow. I believe there's a God in the form of the unseen world. What else? No. I don't believe anymore in a godlike entity. Based on Dharma? No. Yes and no. There is not a God. Okay, so we've got a whole range of answers there. I don't care. That one's true. Not as anything that can be conceptualized as God. Okay, I'm going to ask another question now. What happens when we die? Put your answers put your truth in the chat for me. What happens when we die? I don't know. I'll see. Zoltan is the one who is giving me the most truth at the moment. What's the truth? What happens when we live? Something we can't currently comprehend. Become something else? Okay. Continue our very long learning process in many lives. And so that's according to Buddhist theory. Okay, so I'm going to read a little bit from this very famous Kalama Sutta, which is a different sutta, and it's the Buddha's advice on how we don't find truth. So this is what the Buddha says to the Kalamas. He says, don't go by reports. That includes reports from Buddhist teachers. Don't go by legends. Don't go by traditions. Don't go by scripture. Don't go by logic. Don't go by inference. Don't go by analogies. don't go by agreement through pondering various different views, by probability, or by the thought, this person is our teacher. So just want you to have a think when you came to these answers on these questions here. How many of you were going by logic or by what you've heard or by a scripture or by a view or from a teacher? What the Buddha was saying is the way to truth is through what we can directly observe. What we can directly observe. So when it comes to the question of is there a God, for most of us, I think, thank you for these messages that are still coming in. What the truth is for most of us, I think, is we don't know. We don't know if there is a God or not. And the truth for most of us of what happens when we die is we don't know. We might have a belief that offers some comfort, but the truth is we don't know. We don't know. And when are we going to die? When are we going to die? Do you know? We don't know. So if we just take a moment to be with that truth, we don't know when we're going to die, and we don't know what's going to happen next. We might have some comforting belief system, but we don't know. That belief might not be so pleasing, or that truth might not be so pleasing, but it's beneficial. And it's beneficial because it gives rise to urgency. It gives rise to wanting to find a method to those answers. So the Buddha said that the way to find truth is through direct observation. Direct observation. So we've been directly observing life for some time already, at least since we were born. Been directly observing all of the time. So why aren't we liberated yet? Why aren't we enlightened yet? I've been at this directly observing thing for 38 years already. Been directly observing all day today, seeing the sights, hearing the sounds, smelling the smells, tasting my tomato soup. Why aren't I fully enlightened already? And the reason here is because the quality of our attention hasn't been trained. We're not sustaining our attention for long enough. So what the Buddha is saying is that the power, where if we want to go deeper in the truth, the power comes from sustaining our attention for longer. It's a simple truth, but it's revolutionary. We don't need to know more and more and more and more diverse things. We need to know one thing or very few things in greater depth and detail through sustaining our attention. This is the way to truth. And so this quest for truth immediately guides us into this meditative path, into the teachings of the Buddha. The Buddha was saying, you can't know the truth through thinking. Can we? People have been thinking for very, very many years, but I didn't see any of them get enlightened that way. So this longing for truth guides us towards the Dharma, and sustaining our attention is the way there. So I think I'm going to invite us to do maybe just a 5-minute meditation. We're going to practice this aspect of sustaining our attention. And those of you who have been meditating a long time already, I invite you to do this wholeheartedly, and we're going to see what new things we can learn, even though maybe we think this is something we've done very many times before. What new things can we learn through this simple act of sustaining our attention? We're going to practice for 6 minutes, so until 45 of the hour. I'm going to invite us to close our eyes, and we're going to sustain our attention with our eyes closed on our left hand. I'm going to finish this short meditation by saying ding, so make sure you can hear my sound. We're going to see, through sustaining our attention on our left hand, what truths can we learn? Okay, let's meditate together. Ding. So, give us a moment to open our eyes and come back together. And again, I invite you to write in the chat what you noticed there when you sustained your attention on your left hand. What are some of the things we noticed? I noticed how neglected my hands usually are, how little love I usually give them. Warmer inside than the ambient air. Yeah, me too. Vibrations. Warm like a rubber glove filled with something. I notice some jealousy. My fingers are chilly. Yeah, your hand really extends into your arm. Pain is sensation. It's immediate, but also not where I am. Interesting. So many different sensations. Yeah. It's a whole universe going on there, isn't there? In our left hand. Could not figure out exactly where it starts and where it ends. Yeah, this is something that happens when we start really paying attention. Our sense of the conceptual boundaries starts to fall away. Yeah. My mind wandering because the hand is not interesting enough. Yeah, I'm really pleased. I like this truth that's coming from Zoltan today. So what we learn is that when we pay what we call wise attention, when we sustain our attention on our left hand or on anything, a whole universe opens up. It can become fascinating. It can become so much more interesting than any, I don't know, content we might want to watch online or party we might want to go to. It can become really fascinating. And the longer we sustain our attention, the more interesting it gets. But there's this other side to attention that happens, and is happening more and more these days, where so often the things that we pay attention to, the other side, the other party has taken all of the responsibility for making it attention grabbing. The makers of the online content, or the makers of the billboards, or the people who make the packaging on our food, or the people who design the cities we live in, the music that we listen to, the people who are creating those objects of attention have taken all of the responsibility to make our attention go there. And so we are losing, or our own skill in being interested in exercising our interest is atrophying. It's becoming weaker. Sometimes the example I give is, if you remember when you were a child, a toddler, you could be put in a room with a blank sheet of paper, and you could make a whole afternoon of fun out of one blank sheet of paper. You could make a boat and a hat and a castle and a paper chain and so many things, and you could make it fascinating. And that skill of staying interested in a simple thing is one of the skills that we build in meditation. rather than, oh, somebody else make it interesting for me. So that's the way the world usually works these days. Other people are making it interesting for us. But no, let me make this one simple thing interesting so that I can sustain my attention for longer, because that's where a whole world of truth opens up. That's where the practice comes alive. Oh, I just want to read this one. I first noticed the coursing blood in the veins of my hands and fingers. Then I noticed the plumpness of feeling my finger pads and the palm of my hand. Then I noticed my shoulder, how it was holding. And so I left, and so I let it go, release, and this affected my left hand. Then I noticed the base of my spine, sit bones connecting to the spine, that it connects to the shoulder, which then leads down to the left hand. So there's so much there. There's so much there. If we really got fascinated in it, couldn't we spend a whole day just doing that and loving it and not spending any money and not harming anybody? And monastic life is a bit like that. It's getting fascinated by the simple things. That's where truth lies. I'm going to move on to the other side of the coin, the suffering side of the coin, because we said truth and suffering, they are like two sides of the same coin. So we're going to look at it from the other side, look at it from the side of suffering. And I think I'm going to put us back into small groups like we did last time, Laura, if you wouldn't mind. And the question that we're going to go in with is, what is causing our suffering? So what I want us to do is take turns to speak in our small groups. And we're going to be in these groups for like 10 minutes. So, okay. Just wait a moment for her to come back. And let's have some time for reporting back. So what did we learn in those groups about what is causing our suffering? Take a moment to write the main takeaways from that in the chat for me. Habitual attitudes. What else?
US 101 North.
Not knowing why we're suffering. Yeah, our attitude towards reality. We had one in our group about fear. Not wanting to suffer, expectations. I had one as well about impatience. Not wanting to suffer. This irony of not liking the suffering, making the suffering even worse. Anything else that is what's causing the suffering? That we can't get exactly what we want. Yeah. This one also identified by the Buddha. Anything else? Attachment to views of others or of self. Narcissistic or childish attitude. Yeah, thank you for reminding me of that one, friend. Yeah, wonderful. So the Buddha, this was like his favorite topic, was suffering and the ending of suffering. And because it was, you could say, his favorite topic, it's where he sustained his attention over very, very many lives. He had a lot of clarity there. And very helpfully, the Buddha split everything that we do And it could be something that we do with our body, it could be something that we say, or it could be a mental action, it could be a thought or an attitude or a view or an opinion. Put all of these different things into two categories. On the one side, we've got the skillful, and on the other side, we've got the unskillful. The skillful side leads us out of suffering, and the unskillful side is what is causing the suffering. Unskillful actions. But unskillful actions here doesn't have to be just actions with our body again. It could be something as simple as a thought or an attitude or a way of paying attention. And on the unskillful side, there are so many different things we could do. It could be killing or stealing or shouting or screaming or lying or hating or judging. It could be being fearful. It could be being lazy. It could be being greedy. So many big variety of things we can do there. But of all of these different unskillful things we can do that cause suffering, the Buddha condensed it down into what he called 3 roots. And these 3 roots, maybe, I think most of you know already, but it's good to know again. These 3 roots are greed, so wanting things we don't have. And somebody already contributed to our discussion. Wanting things we don't have, or holding on tightly to the things we already have, not wanting to lose the things we already have. The second root is hatred. This is not liking what's there. And hatred takes the form of fear, which is an aversion towards an idea of the future. It could take the form of worry, of sadness, of anger, of grief. Many different forms that hatred can take. And the third root is delusion, which is seeing things not as they really are. So these 3 roots in very many forms are causing us to suffer. Causing us to suffer. And these 3 roots of greed, hatred, and delusion, they manifest in different levels in our lives. At the most coarse level, they're impacting our bodily and our verbal behavior. So some things I already mentioned. How do we know if greed has really got the better of us? Well, if we eat 2 tubs of ice cream in one sitting, if we steal something, if we spend more money than we have or are likely to ever have. So many ways that we can know when greed has really become extreme. How do we know when hatred has become extreme? Again, if we start shouting, screaming, kicking, biting, punching, killing, then we know, okay, wow, hatred's really got extreme. Those are gross manifestations of these unskillful roots in us that cause suffering. But what about when we come to meditation? What about when we come to meditation? This is where things get a bit more refined. And it's the level of the mind. And this is where the Buddha also brings in a little bit more nuance to help us. And here the Buddha breaks down these 3 roots into 5 categories. 5. So these 3 become 5, just to add a little bit more nuance to what our mind is doing. And the Buddha says when we try to sustain attention on something, then these unskillful roots can manifest in one of 5 ways. The first is as craving for things through the senses. So it could be that we are thinking about speaking to our best friend. We're thinking about what we're going to have for lunch. Anything, craving something through the senses. We're wanting to listen to music or go out and lie in the sun. We're not liking something. It could be that there's a pain in the body and we don't like it, or our mind isn't as calm as we want it to be and we don't like it. There's some emotion we're experiencing. and we don't like that emotion. It could be we don't like our meditation object. We don't like the teacher. We don't like the place where we're sat. We're not liking something. The third is sleepiness. We're disengaged. It's not interesting enough. Often the sleepiness is rooted in a subtle kind of aversion. We don't like it enough, so we check out and go and have a sleep. The fourth is restlessness. This is the mind that can't just stay with one thing. It wants to go to lots of different things. And restlessness is fueled by a combination of craving and aversion. I want this like that. And this is the mode that our mind is in most of the time. It's back and forth between craving and aversion on a very low level but persistent level. And then the last one that catches us out is doubt. Doubt. Oh, is this even the right thing to do? Why am I sitting here meditating? Maybe that teacher's no good, and did the Buddha really exist? And doubt. Very tricky one. And doubt creeps in and undermines our attempt to sustain our attention. So for meditators, overcoming these 5 obstacles in our practice makes up maybe 80% of our work. Becoming skillful with overcoming these 5 obstacles is, it's the vast majority of our work. And when we're skillful at that, everything else starts to flow smoothly. So I'm going to invite us again to do another 5-minute meditation. We're going to focus again on our left hand, but this time, as well as noticing our left hand, I want us to notice if any of these 5 obstacles, 5 hindrances we sometimes call, if we can notice those arising in our mind as we pay attention to our hands. So I'll repeat them. The first one is craving, wanting something that isn't there. The second one, aversion, not liking something. Oh, my finger's too cold. Oh, it's noisy outside. Oh, my back hurts. The third one is sleepiness, disengagement. The fourth one is restlessness, the mind that won't stay still. And the fifth one is doubt. So let's practice together paying attention to our left hand, noticing for those 5 hindrances as they arise. We'll sit until 20 past the hour, and I will finish our meditation again by saying ding. Ding. I give us a moment to open our eyes. Come back together. And I wonder if any of you could notice those unskillful roots at work in your mind. Maybe if you could, then you can write some examples for me in the chat. If you noticed any cravings, any aversions, any restlessness, what did you notice? Yeah, restlessness, thinking of future actions, plans, exciting ideas. So it's this idea that here isn't great, but if I can get somewhere else, that's where the end of suffering will be. Maybe in the future, maybe if I make it exciting enough, there won't be any suffering there. I'll plan it perfectly. I'll find a clever solution to make samsara not be suffering. Craving for some philosophical breakthrough or insight. Yeah, good one. So it's a different form of the same thing, really, isn't it? If I can just have the clever enough thought, then I won't need to suffer anymore. Where's that thought? Where is it? I spent many, many hours in my meditation with that type of craving. Restless, although stillness and quiet in the mind is far more interesting. Yeah. I felt an effort in trying to conjure up more impressions of the hand and the texture, how it feels on the surface of the skin, the top of the hand feeling cooler. Yeah, but some effort there. Yeah. It sounds like the mind was actually really settled on the hand. Lots of restlessness here too. Internal squirming. Wow, what a word. Craving to remember the hindrances because I always forget them. There's some attachment to Dharma theory there. Oh, these ways that the mind can sabotage itself. These ways that the mind has of making something simple into something very complicated. Agitated state of mind. Yeah. When we start to meditate, one of the things that very many meditators notice is that an agitated state of mind is our like norm, and that we're actually spending most of every day in an agitated state of mind, craving something, not liking this, wanting something else, not liking this, planning something, resenting something, just back and forth around this circle of craving and aversion. And so we do need patience, don't we? My new understanding is to say to myself, I'm happy with what I have when desires and thoughts and aversions, greed, etc., rose in me during the day or night. Yeah, good. Good. That's a very, very skillful way of practice. So one of the things we can practice is that when things do arise that we don't like, or when the mind is agitated, we stop the cycle there. So we meet that agitation with acceptance and with love and with kindness, so that we're not hating the agitation and wanting something else and making ourselves more agitated. Yeah, in this moment, what do you lack? A beautiful question. This is a question that can guide us really powerfully back to contentment. Very powerful one. Hatred that there are these hindrances. Yeah. So this is a big obstacle to overcome in practice. How not to hate the hindrances. Because they're going to be there for a while. I'm warning you, they're going to be there for a while. So how can we not allow the hindrances to send us into a negative spiral? Mm. So we are seeing now where our suffering is really coming from. So I had a couple of different things in mind to talk about, but I want to leave some time for Q&A, I think, at the end, so I can get a sense of what you would all like to know a bit more about. So for now, I'm just going to invite one more topic of conversation. After that, we'll do a short meditation, like a digesting time, and I'll leave about 15 minutes, 10-15 minutes at the end for Q&A. So our last topic of conversation today is going to be liberation, which I think, to honor the title of this event, we'll give a little bit of time to that. So if we are coming to the Dharma because of these forces of wanting to know the truth and not wanting to suffer, then what does that tell us about the nature of liberation? What does liberation mean to us? I invite us all just to, I think because of time, I'm not going to put us into breakout rooms again, but just invite us all to be with that question for a moment. What does liberation mean to us? And if you feel ready, then I invite you to post something in the chat. We come to the practice because we want truth. We don't want to suffer. So what's the goal then? What's liberation then? Joy, the ability to accept others without judgment. A state of mind of profound peace and tranquility. The path which includes suffering. Yeah, living in the truth. I was going to ask, how does liberation relate to the truth? Freedom, please. How does liberation relate to the truth? Everybody wants the happy place they can go to forever, don't they? There'll be this great state of mind and I'll stay there forever. Is that what liberation is? Great state of mind where you stay forever? Abiding in a place where there are no more questions regarding truth. Yeah, the natural mode of being contains minimal suffering and hindrances. Happiness and gratitude with each breath. Though life will have hardships and wonderful moments, acceptance of what is. It's related to some peace. So, I'm pleased I asked this question because what I get from the answers is liberation is going beyond all perception. Yeah, what I get from all of the answers, apart from that last one from Pete, is you're not aiming high enough. The Dharma can do more than that. The Dharma is better than that. To have a meaningful life, which leads to Nibbana, seeing life as it is. Yeah, you can do better than that. So all of these things that you mention, accepting others, living a meaningful life, accepting what is, they're all side effects along the way. You'll get that. It comes along with the deal. But liberation is better even than that. Liberation is better even than that. The end of samsara, yeah. Yeah, the end of samsara, the end of suffering. But what does it mean? Is the end of suffering just a state of never-ending joy? It's even better than that. Okay, we've got some really great answers there. We're short of time, so I'm not going to launch into a philosophical explanation of liberation right now. For now, I just want you all to know it's better than what most of you said. And possible. So maybe if there are questions on this, then you can ask at the end in the Q&A. So I think let's meditate together for, well, we'll do 13 minutes, probably 12 minutes, until 45 of the hour. And I'm assuming that most of you already have some basic meditation practice that you are familiar with, in which case please practice that. So I encourage you all to do the meditation practice that you are already comfortable with. And if you have no meditation practice, you have never received any instruction yet, I'm not familiar with the group, then for the purposes of playfulness and our event today, I invite you all to continue to sustain your attention on your left hand. It's a great object of attention. So we'll sit together until 45 of the hour. And I will finish meditation by saying ding. I give us a moment to open our eyes and come back together. Sometimes it really pains me to end meditations, and that was one of those times. I would have liked to have sat with you all for longer. We've got about 10 minutes that I'm going to leave for Q&A. Usually I like to do much more Q&A so that I can talk about the things you actually want to know about, but our time today is limited. So if you want to ask a question, just to keep it not chaos, I'll give two methods. The first one is you can write your question in the chat. The second one is you can raise your Zoom hand. You can press the raised hand button and I will answer. So 10 minutes for Q&A, and then I'll hand over to Laura to close. I think Ayush was first there with hand up. What's your question? You can turn on your mic and let me know.
Hey Beth, so I had like two kind of related questions. So I was wondering if you could share a bit about like the role that monastic life played in your practice, and like basically related to that, like do you think that there are aspects of the Dharma that are like more difficult to access for people who are like living like modern Western lifestyles, and like for young people who are really like interested in this stuff, would you recommend like intensive training like that?
Good question. Yeah, so I ordained as a nun when I was 25, and I lived as a monastic for 10 years until I was 35. And for me, I loved it. I loved it. I think when I die, I'll remember it as being the best years of my life. It was fantastic. All of my needs were met, and I had great teachers, and I liked the place, and I didn't love the food, but it was a small price to pay, and it was great. You know, like I could ask any question, I'd get brilliant answers. And I saw lots of Westerners who go into monastic life really struggle. And I will say that amongst all of the people that I know, amongst the Westerners, I know a lot of meditators, and amongst the Westerners, most of the advanced practitioners are lay people. So most of the Westerners who have entered monastic life haven't thrived. And the reason is that it can be really challenging to enter monastic life without picking up a very heavy cultural burden. It can feel like not only I have to be a monastic, but I've also got to learn how to be Burmese, or I've got to learn how to be Thai. I've got to redo all of my childhood conditioning to behave in the right way. And that's not really the essence of Buddha's teachings, like trying to morph your being into a different style of being. The Buddha's teaching is about acceptance, but to be culturally sensitive, to live harmoniously with the community, we have to change a lot. And I think I was lucky because I ordained quite young and I was still pretty flexible. So some people like me, I loved ordained life, and I would, if all I had seen was my own experience, I'd recommend it to everybody. But I've seen also a lot of people who become very tense, very hard on themselves. They take the rules very seriously. They miss home. They struggle with the weather. So what I would say is more essential if you really want to go deep into Dharma practice is to have good guidance. So make sure you're in contact with at least one good teacher who you have a good relationship with and who is well practiced. And then also, this is the struggle with lay life because we need to earn money and we need to sustain ourselves, but that you can make time each year for retreat, for in-depth, uninterrupted practice. You're not going to get to the depth you want with sitting half an hour a day or an hour a day. We need at least some parts of our life where meditation is our full-time job for a while. at least a few weeks, or once in a while, a few months. So, yeah, I'll leave that with you. It's definitely a really personal thing. And if you're not sure, go give monastic life a try. Go give it a try and see how you feel. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you. That was helpful.
Okay, and Janji, what's your question?
Hi, everyone. I have two questions. The first is that what liberation means for you? As you ended up the question, and I'm very curious for your answer. And the second question is that how to differentiate between what to accept and what to change.
Oh, good question. Good question. They're two really big questions, and I'm aware that I've got 4 minutes. So I'm going to make Janji's question the last question. So what liberation means to me is, well, I'll link it back first of all to this topic of truth. So as we do sustain our attention, as we do that more and more, eventually what manifests is that there are only truths that are always true. Everything, all of the other truths are partially true, but the 3 truths that are always true is that everything is impermanent, that everything is suffering. That's a big one. Everything is suffering, and everything is non-self. Nothing is you. Everything is impermanent means momentarily coming into and out of existence. Materiality is momentarily coming into and out of existence. These moments of mind are momentarily coming into and out of existence. And that impermanent nature makes things inherently suffering. It means that usually we wouldn't think that joy is a form of suffering, but that joy has this momentary arising and perishing nature. That arising and perishing isn't peaceful, it's aggravating, it's a type of suffering. Happiness, it's got this momentary coming into and out of existence thing going on that makes it inherently not peaceful. It's aggravating to the mind at a certain level of subtlety. Even happiness is aggravating to the mind. Even our tranquility is aggravating to the mind. Even consciousness is aggravating to the mind. And the third truth that manifests is that it's all non-self. It's not yours. So liberation is the absence of that. It's the absence of any aggravation of any more impermanent suffering non-self stuff. No joy, no happiness, no peace, no bliss, no light, no consciousness, no perception. The absence of all of it, because we've understood wherever we are in samsara, in existence, it's going to be impermanent suffering and non-self. That's what liberation is to me. The absence of what we call the 5 aggregates, the absence of materiality, mentality, the absence of everything that is samsara, the absence of everything that's gone before. So this is liberation, and until certain experience in the Dharma, it can be difficult to understand why that's desirable. We might think the joy is better than the absence of joy, or happiness. Well, I'll just keep the happiness. But when we sustain our attention, the power of sustained attention, when we sustain our attention on that happiness, we start to see deeper. Oh no, that's also aggravating. We want something better, and we can do better. And the Buddha was guiding us towards that. So I would say in your meditation, it's definitely possible to experience really delightful things, but don't give up there. You can do better. It's possible and worth it. The second part of the question is when to accept and when to change. So this really depends on where we're at in our path and where we are still holding what I would call legitimate attachments. So the Buddha said, he gave this simile of using a raft to cross the river. And when you get to the other side of the river, you don't pick up the raft and carry it with you through the forest. You've crossed the river, so you put down the raft. And the Buddha was using that simile to describe the teachings, the Dharma, that once we've crossed the raft and we're at enlightenment, even our attachment to the Dharma we have to give up. But at the same time, when we're in the middle of the river, we don't say, I'm a bit attached to this raft. I think I'll better throw this one out, because we'll be drowning in the middle of the river. So there are things on our Dharma path that we legitimately need to attach to for a while and know the time to give them up. Some examples are a good teacher, a suitable place to stay, the body, right food, for example, wise friends. All of these things we need to hold on to for a while until we've crossed the river we're crossing. So where to change things is around what we're legitimately clinging to. It depends what river we're crossing at the moment in our practice. What do we need to cling on to in order to cross that river? If our raft's got a leak in it, we want to change it. So say, for example, we have attachment to a teacher. We notice our teacher is abusing people. That's not for us to just accept and keep on learning from that teacher. That's for us to change something, because we still hold some attachment there. The things that we have no investment in, no attachment to, that's for us to just accept. And when we've crossed all the rivers that need to be crossed, then we can rest in a place of just acceptance. So if your house is burning down, that's not for you to sit there focusing on your breath, just accepting it. We need our house. If your food is moldy, it's not for you to think, oh, just mold. It's a part of existence. I accept it and swallow it down. No, eat something nourishing. So we need our body. Okay, so I think that's all we have time for today. I'm going to hand over to Laura now to close.
Thank you so much, Beth. Yeah, what a beautiful and illuminating class. And thank you all so much for coming and for joining us at Dharma Gates. We just have a note about donations. We're supported by donations. The extent to which this project and the extent to which the world will change is the extent to which we can value things according to their worth and not their price. If you are a person with resources, we encourage you to support Dharma Gates and everything else according to how beneficial you believe these projects are for the world. If you are not a person with resources, thank you for offering the gift of your presence and keep us in mind as we move forward. All right, thank you all so much for coming. Deep gratitude to you, Beth. And we hope to see you again soon.
Yeah,
Thank
so
you.
much, Laura. You know, Laura told me that she was new to Zoom and she's done a great job. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.